This is my talk today is because it did have short notice. It's based upon two of the chapters that are in this book called Silly Me, Path to Self-Acceptance. It's based upon a couple of chapters in this book, one of these books that I wrote. And it's about, did you see the moment?
Arrow.
That's the title of this talk, Judgment, how it shows up in our lives and ways to suspend and transform it. Now, in traditional Western teachings, we are taught, at least I was, that God judges, and we have 10 commandments to remind us of how we are to live. So it's very structured, traditional doctrine. We are born in sin, I remember being told that, and Jesus sacrificed his life for us. There were conflicting messages. Jesus loves me, this I know. I remember that song. And yet, God was described in both words and paintings as a wrathful presence. And most of us have been taught to judge ourselves and judge others. If you really think about it, that's our Western tradition. That's how we get ahead. It is this consciousness of judgment that is at the root of all that separates us from others and from aspects of ourselves. I think, based upon what I know about some of you, you know this already. It shows up in your slides and things that Reverend Nancy's been teaching you this, so it's not new news, but it's important to know that when we have these judgments, either about ourselves or about others, we are blocking our own capacity to be who we truly are, because we are, whether we realize it or not, divine and exquisite expressions of all that God is. Each one of us is that. But we sometimes forget it because our upbringing tells us something very different. These are some of the things that we end up doing that separates us from ourselves and from others. Comparing ourselves to others. Comparing others to others. That's the kind of thing that sometimes happens in little social cliques where you get together with friends. You may not do this, but I can recall having done it. And that is, you start to talk about somebody else. They're not in the room, but you talk about them. That's gossip, and it is comparing ourselves to others. And then there's comparing others to others. We talk about other people, and we feel comfortable, some of us do, in certain moments. I'm guilty of it. Not too often these days, but I've done it. So I know what it feels like, and it doesn't feel warm and fuzzy when I do that. Particularly now that we know the truth of who we all are, when we break our own capacity to be that love, and we're not in it, we know it. And it's not a comfortable place to be, and we don't usually stay there very long. These are all the ways we learn how to get ahead, achieve success, and accomplish our life goals, or not. So maybe you can just take a brief moment to consider whether any of these apply to you, even now. Sometimes it's hard, we don't want to acknowledge that, yeah, I'm not who I would like to think I am all the time, but I am sometimes. So take take joy in that, and being aware that we aren't, that we're sort of below the line, that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity when we see it to then look more deeply and see what is it about my thinking or my acting, my behavior that's keeping me separated from the best that I am and from others. And this is the good news, and I did that intentionally, G-O capital and then capital D at the end of it. The God news, the real truth is that's not who we are. And like all truth, it is the truth if we believe it. Do you understand that? That if we are believing that, that's our truth. And we will outpicture it. God doesn't question what we hold in mind produces after its own kind. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that. Well, it's true. Till we can interrupt that, take a look at it compassionately, and recognize that's not who I am, not truly. Then we can take that as an opportunity to change our mind and change our life. We have the power of choice. We can change our lives in an instant, the moment we open ourselves to compassionate inquiry, to a greater level of self-awareness. For some of us, like myself, this realization, this capacity to allow the deeply wounded aspects of ourselves to surface long enough for us to bring our hidden shadow beliefs into the light of compassionate inquiry came to us very late. I've been in unity and studying it since I got sober in
1973.
Yeah. How did she get? And I was very fortunate to find as my sponsor in the 12-step recovery program a man who eventually became a unity minister, but he was deeply involved in unity and was one of their lay leaders in New York City. And that's where I found my own sobriety, and it's where I found unity. It's where I found Eric Butterworth. Powerful, he and his wife Olga. We have very personal connections with both of them through most of the years until they passed on. I made some notes to myself to perhaps share just a little bit about myself. Some of you know, a lot of you don't know who I am or what my background is. Very briefly, I won't get into an autobiography by any means. You can read any of my books and they are a reflection of my life. So particularly the novels that I wrote at the very beginning. I wrote a trilogy of novels called Objects for Reflection, Journey into Love. Sorry, I'll speak up. I tend to get down into my comfort zone, which doesn't allow you to hear me. So, I was born into a family of dysfunction. They were not a happy couple, and they had two older teenage kids. And I was a late comer, and my birth mother and father they didn't make it. She finally found somebody outside the marriage and eventually left me. My father took me with her because I was only 2 years old and he was working and had two other older kids, and he just simply couldn't handle a 2-year-old child. She quickly passed me on to other people because her new husband didn't want baggage, as he used to call me. You can read between the lines to know that there was a lot of uncertainty about who I was and did I have any value at all, because he kept tossing me around to different people, so I never had a sense of stability. And I was in foster homes, finally met the woman who would later become my adopted mother. She was a sweetheart. I took on her maiden name, Howard, as my pen name, because I truly adored that woman. She was beautiful. My dad, not so much. He had a lot of baggage of his own, and he was a man's man, and I surely was not. I was a sensitive child. I was very artistic, but I was also very needy, and he just didn't know how to handle that. I understand that now, and eventually we became very, very tight, very close, very loving. But it took a lifetime, nearly, for me to become more about who I was, and for him to recognize that as I did. So it's a sweet story. It made for a tough time for me growing up. Now, there are ways to suspend and transform judgment, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here. This is a quote that I wanted to read to you. William Siegert is the author of Poetry, Pharmacy Returns, More Prescriptions for Courage, Healing, and Hope. And what he says is, you want to lash out at the parts of yourself that seem to hold you back. At moments like that, it is important to be able to sit down and speak gently and within yourself, as if saying a prayer or reading a poem. Whichever part of you is unhappy, reassure it. Accept your many selves and allow them to speak both to you and to each other. And it's sort of a recipe for self-nurturing, because there is within all of us many aspects, and there is that nurturing, loving parent, and that's the part that we need to get in touch with, so that when we are dealing with others and we see that they are hurting, or we see a part of ourselves that's hurting, we can nurture ourselves, and as we do that, we become capable to nurture others the same way. And then we become a demonstration of that love. So this is a suggested way that I came up with for ways to suspend and transform judgment. The thing to know is any judgments or beliefs we hold about ourselves, whether or not we are aware of them, we also hold the truth about others. Why? Because we project. What we don't like or want to face within ourselves, it's just uncomfortable to admit to these false beliefs about ourselves that we developed very early on in our lives. And we may well have continue that on in our choices for partners. Sometimes when we're sick, we choose sick people. And then we live that out thinking that's all I'm supposed to have. So we project that when we become aware of it because it's painful, and we project it out to other people. And now we're seeing others as someone to be fearful of. And we live our lives with a certain amount of fear. And I just go on to say this is why it's so important that we engage in practices like the quantum living, which I suspect you folks have been exposed to it. Quantum living? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure she'll have another class it's a great class. Originally, I'm a certified Q coach myself, called a living coach. But when I took it, it was called The Art and Practice of Living with Nothing and No One Against Us. And it's still taught with using that format. It's an older format. The Q Effect practice was another version of it, a more recent version, and now it's called Quantum Living Practice. So any of them, they teach the same things, but the co-founders of it have improved it so much, made it easier, less threatening, really a more loving presentation of these truths and these ways of overcoming all that stuff that we believed about ourselves in the past. Or when even though we may not believe it anymore, trust me, it comes up every once in a while. And it comes up when we're under stress. And then when we're under stress, we've lost our connection with our own heart. So a suggested approach to suspending one's judgments. Step 1, take several deep breaths. Concentrate on the sound and feeling of your breathing. Relax, quiet your mind by something like peace, be still. For some of us, that is enough to open up our heart in that space that is open to learning. And this is something I suggest you state aloud. And if anybody wants a copy of this, I can just leave me your email addresses and I'll email them to you in case you want to incorporate it into your life. This is an important in the way it's worded, this statement. I commit to being kind to myself and refrain from any form of self-judgment as I prepare to bring to the surface long-held beliefs I've had about myself. I am willing right now to give voice to these beliefs and write them down in my private journal and then reconsider whether they are true or not. It's very important that when you finally get aware of something and there's a glimmer of knowing, it says, I don't think this is really true about me. I know I acted it and believed it, but I also believe it's not the truth. Not really. And the moment we have that, that is an opening for us to then do the work that enables us to look at that with whatever that belief is that limits us, to look at it with compassionate inquiry. I got that one from Jane Simmons, who's one of the co-founders of the Q process. And I love the words because it requires compassion and it's curious inquiry. So I commit to being kind to myself and refrain from any form of self-judgment as I prepare to bring to the surface long-held beliefs I've had about myself. I'm willing right now to give voice to these beliefs and then write them down. And writing them down is important because once you get it down on paper, it's only you seeing it. You can't very well hide it because it's there in writing. And it's you may close the journal, but you'll come back to it because you've just revealed it, or it's been revealed to you, and then you start to do your work. And this is also true. I'm only suspending judgment, not giving up my right to reclaim the judgment after I've spent time being compassionately curious about it. It is my choice, so you can temporarily say, okay, I'm going to suspend that judgment, but I may want to pick it up again and believe it. It's your choice. Just a pause here, that if what arises to the surface causes you to react with a lot of fear and anxiety, then I suggest you not attempt to use this approach to dealing with it. That instead you have some gentle support of a trained therapist or a true trusted minister. This isn't something you want to try to do on your own off in a book. As well-meaning as it is, you need better support. In general, your worksheet, and create on a worksheet 3 columns, each of them taking up 1/3 of the page. Label them left to right, self-judgment, reason to let go and let God, and then reasons for holding on. So it's an opportunity for you to work through answering those questions. Just another note, because sometimes this happens. If you find yourself wanting to put the label or trait on someone else, that is simply the wounded part of us wanting to blame others than claim. This might be a perfect time for you to say, silly me, there I go again. I like this picture that was created for me by the publisher, and it's called A Path to Self-Acceptance, and we need to be able to laugh at ourselves, even when we're, as you know, below the line. Someone else may be judging us for doing it. That's not my business. If you're judging what I do, you've got something to work on. That's my personal view. I'm responsible for me, and for a long time, what you said or did, or what I thought you said or did, mattered so much that what I believed or what I knew about myself took second. It knocked out of the picture, because I was still wanting to please someone else and fit in and be accepted. And all of those are shadow beliefs that we have an opportunity to look at, clear out. But also a comment on that to be clear, however, we must claim all aspects of ourselves, even those parts we don't like, before we can expect to be free of the limitations they cause in our lives. Gotta look at it and then do something about it before you can ever expect to be free of it. Transforming our judgments. I like to say that you've taken an important first step toward gaining consciousness of self-acceptance by recognizing and defining some of the critical and limiting beliefs keeping you from an awareness of your strengths. When you align your mind and your heart to that effort. If you see clearly the belief about yourself was true at some point in the past, but is no longer true, or no longer serves you, then it's time to release the false belief and leave it as part of an old story about how you used to be. And one of the things you're probably already finding that you've taken the CUTE course, or some version of it, and if you haven't, I encourage you to take it, because you learn how to leave that in the past. And I wrote another book that's called What's Your Story, and Does It Still Serve You? It's the old story. You don't want to keep conjuring it up and bringing it up and talking about it, because then it ain't old and it's still operating in your life at some level. So once you can claim this is not my story anymore, and you've done the work to release it, then you're on good ground to be who you are. There's 2 tools we use at Unity that I highly recommend to reinforce your decision to make a change. One of them is the use of denial statements. Denial statement, as a lot of you already know, is a statement that serves to dissolve the power our mental mind has given to a false belief. It is not a denial of something that may in fact be true or exist in reality. It's a denial of its power over us. Big difference. It may be something we're dealing with, but does it have power over us? Here's an example of a denial statement. The belief that I am not enough is a false belief and no longer has any power over me. And if you say that to yourself, and that happens to be one of your false beliefs, you're going to feel the power of that when you say it out loud. And here's another one. This has to do with others. The opinions and actions of others have no power over me. That's claiming self-confidence. You can't make me feel anything unless I let you. It's really what it comes to. And here's the use of affirmative statements. It's an affirmation. An affirmation is a positive statement of truth. Charles Fillmore states in the Revealing Word, the declaring of truth, the mental movement that asserts confidently and persistently the truth of being in the face of all appearances to the contrary. No matter what's out there, firmly he says two important words, I think, is confidently and persistently, meaning it doesn't happen overnight. At least it never has for me. It is something that it becomes ingrained in my life as I spend time practicing prayer and meditation and being in silence, because that's where we open up our hearts and we begin to listen to that inner voice that truly is there to guide us. Here's an example of an affirmation. I am in tune with infinite wisdom and have faith that my life is unfolding in accordance with God's divine flow. And here's another one. Divine love and understanding guides me in all my affairs. And now for some final thoughts. While unity has evolved over the years, two of its core principles have remained the practice of prayer and meditation. When I became consistent in my intention to listen in daily times of silence followed by a time of contemplation, which for me is listening and observing around me with both my mind and my heart. Guidance began to show up as I slowed down, simplified my life, and remained present to the many ways in which my guidance comes. As I've done that, and this is just my experience, the need to judge others has really become pretty minimal. It still happens occasionally. Again, when I'm under stress, no telling how I'm going to react to something that's happening in my life. But I'm aware of it, and it doesn't take a short while, maybe an hour or two for me to go off and get centered, open up my heart again, and then realize, and if there's an apology that's necessary, I'm okay with doing that, settling. With our most significant others, we have most of our opportunities, and my wife, I think, will attest to the fact that I do quite frequently own my own stuff and apologize for projecting it out on her, because it's my stuff. Whoops, I guess this is up for Cheryl Brown. I want to thank you for listening. I didn't time it. It may have run long.